Have you ever wondered how Hollywood legends are really made? Some actors train for years, memorize lines until they bleed, and attend every audition in the city. And yet, sometimes, the biggest roles in cinema history are handed out by pure accident. A missed flight, a wardrobe mix-up, a wrong phone call, and suddenly, someone unknown becomes unforgettable. From silver screen icons to household names, the stories behind these accidental breakthroughs are stranger than fiction, wilder than the scripts themselves. So lean in, because we're diving into the stars who landed iconic roles by sheer coincidence, and the twists of fate that turned Hollywood's unknowns into legends. Harrison Ford. Picture it. A dusty studio in Los Angeles, the 1970s, humming with creative chaos. George Lucas was knee-deep in casting Star Wars, looking for someone to bring a scrappy, roguish charm to the galaxy's most famous smuggler. But the man who would become Han Solo wasn't on the list, not even close. Harrison Ford was a carpenter at the time. Yes, a carpenter, helping friends, making furniture, and occasionally reading lines for actors who were auditioning. That's how Ford ended up in the room with Lucas, just practicing dialogue, just being himself. And that's when lightning struck. Ford had that perfect combination of wit, edge, and casual confidence. He didn't act like he was performing. He acted like he was already Han Solo, leaning against the Millennium Falcon, smirking at danger. Lucas noticed immediately. There was something in the way he delivered lines, that effortless swagger that seemed improvised yet magnetic, that said, "This is the guy." Here's the twist. Ford almost walked away. He assumed the role would go to a bigger star, someone more established, someone the studios would recognize. But Lucas insisted. One phone call later, Harrison Ford's life changed forever. He went from helping actors rehearse to commanding starships, dueling with lightsabers, and delivering lines that would echo through decades. Never tell me the odds. It's wild to think about. The carpenter, who wasn't even auditioning, became one of the most beloved characters in cinematic history. Every swaggering step, every sarcastic quip, every near-impossible stunt carried the accidental magic of someone who hadn't planned to be a hero, but was destined to become one. Ford's casting proves something fascinating about Hollywood and about life itself. Sometimes the perfect star isn't the one with the resume or the accolades. Sometimes it's the one in the background, quietly reading lines, unassuming and unknowingly changing the course of a galaxy and the course of film history itself. Han Solo wouldn't exist without that accident, and Harrison Ford wouldn't be a legend without that single serendipitous moment when fate whispered, "This is your role. Take it." Jack Nicholson. Hollywood is full of stories about roles actors fought for, begged for, or trained endlessly to win. And then there's Jack Nicholson, who landed one of his most iconic roles almost by accident. In 1975, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest was still just a bold, daring script about rebellion, conformity, and the human spirit. Studios were nervous, unsure who could bring the anarchic, magnetic energy of Randall McMurphy to life. Several established stars turned it down, worried about the risk of playing a character who was unruly, chaotic, and not conventionally heroic. Enter Jack Nicholson. He wasn't the first choice. He wasn't even being seriously considered at first, but a combination of timing, persistence, and that unique Nicholson energy made him impossible to ignore. He read the script for fun, curious more than ambitious, and the studio instantly saw the spark they had been missing, that raw charisma, that unpredictable charm, the twinkle of mischief in his eyes. It was McMurphy incarnate. Nicholson brought something that no one else could. Every laugh, every sardonic smirk, every sudden burst of defiance felt real, lived, and dangerously alive. He transformed McMurphy from a fictional rebel into a living, breathing symbol of resistance. And behind the camera, directors and cast recognized the electricity he carried, the kind that makes other performances shine brighter just by proximity. Did you know Nicholson was so committed that he studied mental wards and spent time with patients to understand the world of McMurphy? He didn't just play the part, he inhabited it, turning what could have been a chaotic gamble into an unforgettable triumph. When the film premiered, the critics and audiences were stunned. Nicholson's McMurphy was magnetic, heartbreaking, and entirely original. He earned an Academy Award, and the role became a defining moment in his career because the right actor happened to stumble into the right role at the right time. Jack Nicholson's casting reminds us that Hollywood legends aren't always meticulously planned. Sometimes they arrive by accident, but leave footprints so deep no one ever forgets. Charlize Theron. Some roles are so magnetic, so transformative, they seem destined. And yet, even for Charlize Theron, landing her Academy Award-winning role as Aileen Wuornos almost didn't happen. Back in the early 2000s, Theron was already known as a rising star, glamorous, talented, and versatile. But Monster was different. Director Patty Jenkins had cast other actresses initially, unsure anyone could capture the raw, tragic complexity of Aileen, a woman both feared and misunderstood. Charlize read the script, not as a celebrity chasing prestige, but as an actor drawn to the challenge. And that's when Hollywood fate stepped in. Theron committed fully to the part. And I mean fully. She gained weight, shaved her head, and underwent hours of prosthetic makeup daily. She studied Aileen's mannerisms, speech patterns, and private journals, immersing herself in a character so far removed from Hollywood glamour that it could have been overwhelming. She didn't just act the role, she became it. Here's the twist. The studio had doubts. They worried audiences wouldn't accept the transformation. But once Jenkins saw Theron in character, all hesitation vanished. Theron had found something rare. The perfect collision of preparation, instinct, and accident. Had she declined or been unavailable, the role could have gone to someone less daring, and the cultural impact would have been entirely different. Did you know Theron spent months living partially in Aileen's world, studying her history and psychology, just to ensure authenticity? It wasn't just method acting. It was a deep dive into humanity, fear, and desperation. Every tear, every fierce glare, every quiet moment carried the weight of real-life tragedy, and Theron's performance refused to let the audience look away. When Monster premiered, critics and audiences were stunned. Charlize Theron's Aileen Wuornos was terrifying, heartbreaking, and unforgettable, a transformation so complete it redefined what Hollywood actresses could achieve. Sometimes, fate doesn't hand out roles to the obvious choice. Sometimes, it demands total immersion, courage, and a leap into the unknown. Charlize Theron took that leap, and in doing so, she didn't just play Aileen Wuornos. She became a legend. Jaleel White. Sometimes the roles that define a career aren't planned at all. That was certainly the case for Jaleel White, the actor who would become synonymous with one of television's most iconic nerds, Steve Urkel. White was just a teenager in the late 1980s, taking small roles, navigating auditions, and hoping for a break. Then came a guest spot on Family Matters, a minor character named Steve Urkel. At first, he was supposed to appear in a single episode, a one-off comedic foil. The showrunners didn't know it yet, but the character was about to explode. White brought something unexpected to Urkel, a perfect blend of awkwardness, sincerity, and comic timing. The oversized glasses, suspenders, and lisp weren't gimmicks. They were extensions of his instinctive performance. Viewers laughed, cringed, and rooted for him all at once. The audience saw a character that was larger than life, but still somehow relatable, a rarity for sitcoms of the era. Did you know that Steve Urkel was initially intended to be a background character? White's portrayal was so magnetic, so endlessly quotable, that the producers rewrote scripts to make him a central figure. By the second season, Urkel had become the heart of Family Matters, and Jaleel White became a household name virtually overnight. Off-screen, White was a savvy teen navigating sudden fame. He took the unexpected spotlight seriously, balancing school, acting, and public appearances, all while maintaining the charm and energy that had made his accidental role a sensation. The Steve Urkel phenomenon shows how Hollywood sometimes stumbles onto magic. A single guest role, performed with intelligence and instinct, can become a cultural landmark. Jaleel White didn't just play Urkel, he owned him, turning what could have been a forgettable cameo into one of television's most beloved characters. Sometimes the biggest breaks aren't earned by hours in a studio or months of preparation. Sometimes they arrive quietly, a script, a camera, and an actor who just happens to get it right. Jaleel White's accidental casting as Steve Urkel reminds us that legends can be born from the unlikeliest places, and the smallest roles can become the largest stages. Michael Richards. In the world of television, some characters are meticulously crafted, scripted to the last syllable. And then there's Cosmo Kramer, a character born almost entirely by accident and brought to life by a man whose timing and instincts turned unpredictability into legend. Michael Richards was a stand-up comedian with a few small TV roles when he auditioned for Seinfeld. Originally, Kramer wasn't the eccentric neighbor we remember. He was a minor character with a handful of quirky moments. The writers liked the idea, but they didn't know how explosive the role could become. Richards walked into the audition with a nervous energy and physicality that couldn't be ignored. He flailed, stumbled, lunged, and gestured in ways no one had expected. But it worked. Every entrance became a show-stopping moment. The way he would slide into Jerry's apartment, hair wild, eyes wide, and ideas spilling faster than words could follow, captivated everyone in the room. Here's the twist. Kramer's character wasn't originally supposed to be central to the show. Richards' performance changed that. Producers watched his auditions and early episodes and realized this wasn't a background quirk. This was a star. They rewrote scripts, gave Kramer more scenes, and let Richards improvise, knowing that his unpredictability would bring life to the show in ways the writers couldn't imagine. Did you know that many of Kramer's iconic entrances were entirely improvised? Richards studied physical comedy, but he also trusted instinct. Sometimes a stumble, a flail, or a double take became a defining moment, cementing Kramer in pop culture as one of the most original and beloved sitcom characters of all time. Michael Richards' accidental brilliance shows that television magic often comes from spontaneity. The role wasn't designed for him, but his energy, intuition, and fearlessness transformed a minor neighbor into a comedic icon. In the end, Kramer reminds us that some of the greatest characters are born from accidents, risks, and pure, unfiltered creativity. A lesson every actor and storyteller in Hollywood could take to heart. James Avery. Sometimes the roles that define a career aren't planned. They arrive quietly, almost by accident. That was the case for James Avery, the man who would become the indelible Uncle Phil in The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Avery was already an accomplished actor with years of theater and television work under his belt when he auditioned for the role of a stern but loving patriarch. The part could have gone to any number of seasoned actors, but Avery brought something unique. Gravitas mixed with warmth, a presence that could command a room yet make audiences feel completely at home. The character of Philip Banks required balance. He needed to be authoritative without being unrelatable, strict without losing humor, and fatherly without ever feeling staged. Avery instinctively understood this. From his very first audition, he embodied the heart of the Banks family: discipline, love, and quiet charisma. Producers recognized instantly that he wasn't just reading lines, he was living the role. Did you know that many of Avery's best moments were improvised? His calm, measured delivery often contrasted with Will Smith's chaotic energy, but that contrast created comedy gold. Those iconic walk-ins, those sidelong glances, and the way he delivered "Watch yourself, young man," they became catchphrases because Avery made them feel real. Off-screen, Avery was equally commanding yet humble. Colleagues recall a man with deep wisdom, generosity, and a grounding presence that reflected his on-screen persona. He didn't need to dominate, he simply was a presence that made everyone else shine. Landing Uncle Phil could have been luck, but it was Avery's talent, discipline, and understanding of character that turned what might have been a standard sitcom role into a cultural icon. He transformed Philip Banks into more than a TV dad. He became a symbol of strength, love, and integrity in television history. James Avery's story reminds us that sometimes Hollywood's most iconic roles aren't accidents at all. They're the perfect alignment of timing, talent, and heart. Bob Saget. Sometimes the roles that define an actor's career arrive quietly, almost by accident. That was certainly true for Bob Saget, the man who would become the endlessly patient, slightly neurotic dad, Danny Tanner, on Full House. Saget was already a comedian with a sharp edge, known for stand-up that was anything but family-friendly. He wasn't the obvious choice for a wholesome sitcom patriarch. Studios and producers initially worried that his edgy humor might clash with the role's sweet, domestic tone. But when he read Danny Tanner, something clicked. A combination of warmth, comedic timing, and subtle vulnerability that made him instantly believable as the heart of a chaotic household. Danny Tanner needed balance. He had to be nurturing without being soft, funny without being absurd, and relatable without overshadowing the ensemble cast. Saget brought all that effortlessly. His natural rhythm and timing turned everyday parenting moments into comedic gold, from spilled milk to late-night heart-to-hearts with the girls. Did you know that much of Saget's humor on the show came from improvisation? The writers would set up scenarios, but Bob's delivery, his pauses, expressions, and deadpan reactions turned ordinary lines into memorable moments. He made viewers laugh, cry, and root for a dad who was perfectly human in a perfect TV world. Off-screen, Saget was just as genuine. Colleagues remember him as warm, generous, and deeply connected to the cast. He didn't just play a father, he became a mentor to the young actors, guiding them through fame, school, and life on set. Landing Danny Tanner could have been a fluke, a comedian thrown into a family sitcom, but Bob Saget turned what could have been a simple role into a cultural icon, balancing heart, humor, and humanity. His casting reminds us that in Hollywood, sometimes the right actor isn't obvious. Sometimes it's the one who surprises everyone, quietly, effortlessly, and forever leaving a mark. Deborah Messing. Sometimes the roles that define a career arrive quietly, unexpectedly. And that was the case for Deborah Messing when she stepped into the world of Will and Grace. Messing had been a working actress, honing her craft in theater and small TV roles. When she auditioned for Grace Adler, the witty, neurotic interior designer, the part could have gone to countless actresses, but Deborah brought something uniquely magnetic. Her timing was flawless, her expressions sharp, and her presence somehow both commanding and relatable. Grace needed to be smart, funny, and a little self-absorbed, and Messing delivered all of it effortlessly. The role was meant to balance the chaotic energy of Will Truman, played by Eric McCormick, with a grounded, sometimes neurotic, comedic foil. Deborah's performance elevated Grace beyond a standard sitcom character. Every line, every exaggerated reaction, every sigh of exasperation felt lived in and authentic. Did you know that many of Grace's quirks, from her dramatic gesturing to her obsessively organized personality, were shaped by Deborah's own improvisations? Writers quickly adapted, giving her more freedom in scripts because her instincts made the humor sharper and more relatable. Off-screen, Messing's dedication mirrored Grace's drive. She approached the role with professionalism, humor, and a deep understanding of the character's emotional core. She could balance comedy and vulnerability, turning Grace Adler into a character viewer rooted for, laughed with, and sometimes cringed alongside. The perfect mix that kept a sitcom iconic for decades. Landing Grace Adler could have been luck, a role offered to a talented but relatively unknown actress. But Deborah Messing transformed it into a cultural landmark, redefining what it meant to be the smart, neurotic, lovable lead in a sitcom. Sometimes in Hollywood, magic isn't planned. It arrives quietly, in auditions, in instinct, in someone daring to bring a character fully to life. And in the case of Deborah Messing, it created one of the most memorable TV heroines of the modern era. Lisa Kudrow. Some of Hollywood's most iconic roles aren't planned. They arrive quietly, almost by accident. That was certainly true for Lisa Kudrow, the actress who became the quirky, eccentric, and unforgettable Phoebe Buffay on Friends. Kudrow wasn't the obvious choice. She was a talented actress with theater experience and small TV roles, but casting directors weren't sure who could balance Phoebe's oddball humor with her heartfelt moments. Phoebe needed to be weird without being alienating, funny without being mean-spirited, and lovable in ways that weren't always conventional. Lisa Kudrow brought all of it effortlessly. The role was supposed to be a supporting, slightly quirky character, but Kudrow's instincts transformed Phoebe into a scene stealer. Every offbeat comment, every whimsical song, like the infamous Smelly Cat, became a signature moment because Kudrow had the timing, subtlety, and fearless commitment to make them feel natural. Did you know that much of Phoebe's eccentricity came from Lisa herself? Writers encouraged Kudrow to improvise, and her suggestions and choices shaped the character's personality, making Phoebe a fully realized person, not just a sitcom archetype. Kudrow even helped develop Phoebe's backstory, from her eclectic upbringing to her mysterious past, giving the role layers that audiences still adore decades later. Off-screen, Kudrow's intelligence, humor, and grounded nature mirrored Phoebe's more whimsical traits. She navigated the pressures of a breakout role with professionalism, charm, and lightness that kept her performance fresh throughout 10 seasons. Landing Phoebe Buffay could have been a stroke of luck, a quirky role offered to a talented actress. But Lisa Kudrow turned it into a cultural icon, crafting a character who remains one of television's most beloved oddballs. Sometimes in Hollywood, the magic isn't planned. It arrives quietly, in auditions, in intuition, in someone daring to take a character nobody else could inhabit. For Lisa Kudrow, that quiet magic became Phoebe Buffay. Strange, hilarious, and unforgettable. Matthew Perry. Sometimes, the roles that define a career are discovered in the most unexpected ways. That was certainly true for Matthew Perry, the actor who became the sarcastic, self-deprecating, and endlessly relatable Chandler Bing on Friends. Perry was already working steadily in television, with appearances in shows like Beverly Hills, 90210, and small film roles. But when he auditioned for Chandler, no one could have predicted the chemistry that would define the show. Chandler was written as the sarcastic, witty foil, the guy who could make you laugh while also revealing vulnerability beneath the jokes. Perry didn't just read the lines, he owned them. From his very first audition, it was clear he had something rare: timing. That perfect pause before a punchline, the way his expressions mirrored his character's internal skepticism, and the effortless delivery of humor that could land in any situation. All of it made Chandler immediately magnetic. Here's the twist. Chandler wasn't initially intended to be the fan favorite, but Perry's performance changed that. Writers began giving him more screen time, more scenes, more jokes, letting his instincts shape the character in ways that no script could anticipate. The sarcastic one-liners, the awkward pauses, the quiet vulnerability, Perry made them unforgettable. Did you know much of Chandler's humor came from Perry's own improvisations? He added nuance, subtle gestures, and timing that became signature Chandler traits. Those quirks weren't in the original drafts. They emerged organically, transforming a supporting role into a cultural phenomenon. Off-screen, Perry brought a grounded professionalism that mirrored his character's subtle charm. He handled sudden fame, long shooting schedules, and the pressures of a hit sitcom with humor and grace, never losing the spark that made Chandler so beloved. Landing Chandler Bing could have been a lucky accident, but Matthew Perry turned it into a defining role, proving that sometimes Hollywood magic comes from intuition, timing, and an actor daring to make a character entirely their own. Matthew Perry reminds us that sometimes the best parts aren't earned, they're discovered, and the right actor can turn an unexpected opportunity into a legend. If you love our videos, kindly subscribe our channel and press the bell icon. Our next video will blow your mind. Till then, take care.